What's going on, people? Today we are on the Best Served podcast, and I'm your host, Chef Brother Luck, and I'm talking with my good friend Jensen. And today it's going to get real. I hope you're ready because we're going to touch on the things that we don't want to touch on. We're going to touch on vulnerability. We're going to talk about the uncomfortable, and we're just going to get into it, man, because life is life, and most people don't realize that we're all going through it, man. The struggle is real. Times are hard out there, and you just never know what someone's going through. So today, Jensen, I just want to say welcome. Super excited to talk with you and have a conversation. So, man, how you been? What's been going on?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for this conversation. You and I have chopped it up behind the scenes. So this is actually one of the few times we've gotten in front of the camera, and the first time that's just been you and I. I think we've been in some group conversations on
Mhm.
Best Served Podcast, so I appreciate that. And yeah, times have been hard, man. I've been, trying to put up the facade for a long, long time, and I think you and I talked about it. It's hard when you're on the other side of that wall. So I'm appreciative of you being willing to talk to me today and kind of help me through some of my shit. And
Oh,
I know you've
absolutely.
been through it, so I appreciate that. So I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm nervous as hell, which I never get nervous
It's
in
all
front
good,
of the
bro. It's
camera
all
and
good.
talking, but I'm nervous, man. And so I think that means this is an important conversation.
No, I think it's super important to just always be thinking about like therapy can come in so many different ways, and it's okay talking about our mental health and all. It's always important to talk about it with someone that you feel that is not really involved in your situation, right? Because now you're getting an unbiased opinion, you're getting the ability to share. And honestly, like every therapy session I've been in, I can't believe how like ready I was to talk. Even though I was scared going into those sessions, I was like super ready to
Fact.
just get things off my chest and just like here's what's going on. So you used a word that I love, which is facade, and elaborate on that for me. Come from the depths of where that word comes from for you.
hmm If for anybody who's paid attention to any of my content or Best Served Podcast, you've heard the word facade 842 times because we in the restaurant industry have been so trained to put up that facade. Smile, it's part of your uniform. Leave your shit at the door. You're only as good as your next plate up. Like all of these tropes that we perpetuate. And I spent a lot of time trying to break down the facade when it came to the restaurant industry, when it came to the business model, came to the way that we treat each other. And what it really was is me, I think, a cry for help saying, I'm putting up a facade.
Mm,
Somebody come and break down, my borders and my wall and the facade that I'm putting up because it's so embedded in us. I didn't even realize I was doing it half the time when I put up that facade that I got this figured out. I got it all together. I know what I'm doing. I'm the man. Like people are coming to me wanting to help change the industry. And really, I just needed some help kind of changing myself and changing my perspective. And, it takes, we're tough headed, brother. Like we are tough headed. And I needed to get knocked down all the pegs to get to this point of vulnerability where now I'm like, okay, I can talk about my facade. I think I can talk about my facade. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I might still try and deflect. I can feel myself trying to deflect a little bit and bring some levity and humor to it. But that's just me. The vulnerability though is I wasn't okay for a long time. I
yeah.
don't know if I'm okay right now. I'm better. I can have a therapy session. It feels like this might be for you and I a therapy session a little bit where we need to talk about some stuff and you've been so great at kind of being a spearhead for that for a lot of us being out in front willing to talk about these things. So I want to talk about them not abstractly but talk about them personally.
No, I honestly, bro, like it's never comfortable. When I
Mm,
talk about my story, when I talk about my situation, when I talk about what I have going on in my heart and in my head. And those are such like guarded pieces that I'm scared to share with people because I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be judged. I don't want people's opinion to change of me. I don't want people to coddle me and be like, "Oh,
mm,
now you got to tiptoe around him because he's got mental health issues, or he's had his suicide attempts, or like that piece of it. Like I share it not because I want to, I share it because I think people need to hear your story to find more courage to embrace their own story and get through their own story because your story is not for you, it's for somebody else to hear.
Oh, wow,
And
yeah.
honestly, like I had that message hit me in a church setting, which was crazy because like I've never been a really big like religious person, and I
Okay,
just
yeah,
happened to be in a church setting, and I heard that message, and it hit me so hard that it's just become a big part of my life, which is my story's not about me. My story's for somebody else. But, and I think you'll appreciate this, I've learned that sharing my story also includes other people. So I have to be aware of how I share my story and make sure it's really about me and I'm not putting other people's business out there when they're not ready to share their story. Just because I'm ready
right.
doesn't mean someone else is ready.
Yeah,
Like one of the things that
yeah.
happened was when I was on Top Chef, I shared all these crazy stories about like myself, my past, my upbringing, but also about my mother. And when I got home, she was upset with me. I mean, she was hot.
Mm,
And she was like, "How dare you share my business and put my stuff out there?" A lot of people don't know that about me. A lot of people, my neighbors, the teachers at the school, the like she was so upset that and I didn't even think about it. I'm just sharing this is my story. But it was one of those moments where I realized like with television, with social media, with books, we have to be cautious in how we talk about other people's involvement. So I've
right.
learned to, phrase things of, this is she did the best she could. That was her story, and I'm not here to talk about her story. I want to talk about my story. So I think that's another big piece of like when you're sharing your story, is how to consider other people.
Mm. This is good. This is like, kinda coaching that I need because I haven't gotten very good at telling the story because sometimes I share too much and, like, make other people uncomfortable. Sometimes I'm guarded, and I don't know, it's very Ricky Bobby, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. It's like, how do I give the right amount of the story? Is it how comfortable I feel? Is it how comfortable somebody else feels? And so the one-on-one conversations with people have been really difficult for me.
Yeah,
And that's why I reached out to you and said, "Hey, let's chop it up in this podcast format that for some reason you and I have gravitated towards and found our voices in this way outside of the kitchen, which is totally bizarro world, but it works somehow." And I was like, "This is maybe the most comfortable way I feel to communicate is in this podcast format." So
yeah,
that's been challenging for me is exactly how to tell that story and to have my family feel like, they aren't being outed, in all of this is I think makes a
yeah.
lot of sense to me. So I'm still navigating that and just knowing how to tell your story is really challenging. Like it
We
really is. Like it's not just a chronicling. This happened and then this happened and then this happened. That's not how you tell a story, right?
Yeah.
So being able to understand how to tell that story, I'm still in the midst of it. So this is again another great opportunity that I really appreciate.
Well, and they're chapters. I think that's a big
Mm,
piece too, right? These are just chapters of our story. And just because it was a hard chapter to read or was a hard chapter to get through doesn't mean it's the end of the book. And I think that is one of my personal references of like every morning I get a new chapter and I get the ability to pen that story and choose how I want this story to read. Because now that I've taken ownership of my situation and I'm aware of where I'm at mentally, I'm aware of what I've gone through. I can no longer ignore it, and I can't use that as my like crutch or excuse. I have to own that part and say, you know what? I feel that I'm in a funk right now. I feel that I'm in a depression right now. What am I going to do about it? And that's been one of the craziest pieces in my own story is I can't just be like in the funk anymore. Like
mm,
I know about it. So
right, you're aware.
I'm aware. So I have to take ownership of it. And I'm just choosing to write these stories differently. And I'm finding faster ways and utilizing other methods to get out of kind of my situations when I'm in them. And a lot of that comes down to my circle. A lot of that comes down to the people that I'm closest with. The thing is like we shit on the people that are closest to us the most because
Yeah,
we think they're not going to go anywhere. And
yeah.
like that's the hardest part, man, is You love me, so I can treat you like shit because you're not gonna go nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to them.
No, and it also shows how deep like that I don't know, self-hatred or that self-loathing goes, that you're sabotaging yourself in a lot of ways, like trying to push them away through whatever means. I feel that a lot where, well, I'd have to talk to them real,
Mhm.
and I'm just not ready or able to talk real right now. So I'm gonna put them in a box in the corner, and I'm gonna do that through my words, through my actions, and all that. And I definitely felt that, and that was a big kind of breakthrough for me. Was Betsy, and that's as much as I'm gonna say about Betsy. Was just like breaking through our divide over the last year and a half or so was everything.
Yeah,
And so just like reconnecting with the person that I'm most connected with, even in those dark times, still the most connected with, was like a revelation. It was a completely new type of relationship because it had to be, because what it was becoming and what it was just toxic, and it wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't actually even serving me, even though I was in control, right? I always had to be in control. I always had to say, you know what, tough times don't ever phase me. I was always inflappable and unrelenting in restaurants, in the kitchen, in the business, be a podcast, like whatever. I can just like hustle and grind and make things happen. And so I always out hustled the problem, never having to face it. And now all I do all day, every day is face that problem. And the
yeah,
fact that, she was able to be a part of that has meant everything.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think many chefs, especially, we like to be in control, and we like to control the situation. So whether you're
Yeah.
hosting a show, or you're managing your social media, or you're in a leadership position within your job, you like to be in control because you are the person who is narrating and, essentially kind of steering the ship, right? That is a piece that we all know, especially chefs.
Hmm.
The challenge is most of our backgrounds don't involve us being in control, right? The pain and hurt that we went through, the struggle that we went through, what we had happen to us in our past is usually the exact opposite. It's almost like we
Mm.
create this alternate persona who is the exact opposite of who we are, because that's who we want to become. And that's who would have protected us. That's the person that, we wanted to be there for us. And that's why we're trying to become that person. So, within your story, it sounds, with a lot of what you've kind of mentioned, that you really like to stay in that position of control instead of, being in the second position, which is, do you have the capability of accepting what's going to happen and what's going to happen to you?
I mean, I think the answer still today is no for me on that front. Like I'm still finding myself trying to exert some kind of dominance over the situation,
Mhm.
constantly as a knee jerk. And you mentioned this like persona thing. I feel that 100%. Where it's not fake, right? It's a part of yourself. It's part of who you are. It's part of what you're good at, or the ability, skill, talent, ambition that you have. But it's either amplified or muted in a way that allows you to be more on the ball, is what
Yeah,
it felt like. And then you mentioned this persona that's the opposite. I feel that it's very I think about the Christopher Nolan quote from Dark Knight a lot. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And I
mhm,
think about that a lot. And I was like, was I the villain or was I the hero? Was I on
mhm,
my way up or was I on my way down? And now it all just seems completely spun on its axis. And I'm not sure anymore when I reflect back on moments. And man, I know I've burnt bridges and I've made lasting friendships. And now I'm in a place, brother, where I'm not sure which version of me did one or the other.
mhm.
Like, am I naturally the bridge burner or am I naturally the person who makes, long lasting bonds? And it's hard for me to separate those things. And And through this process the last year and a half, I had a couple now clinically diagnosed mental breaks, right? It's long-term severe depression with psychosis features. First time I've had a diagnosis in my entire life.
Yeah.
And so some of those psychosis stuff, I was like, they're putting me on antipsychotics. And I was like, man, I'm not crazy,
Mhm.
but then they started talking about, well, is this the way that you are? Is this the way that you are? I was like, no, that's not me at all. And they said, well, you had a complete like departure from your own reality. And that's
Yeah.
I've always been sharp, man,
Yeah.
known to be sharp, whiz kid type stuff. Like, and now I'm on antipsychotics. Like, this is how far can you fall when you have this shiny, you know, like view of yourself? That's tough.
I don't even think it's that it's a fall. I think, the first step is obviously the diagnosis, right? When I was diagnosed with PTSD, I didn't get it because I didn't go to war. I'm not a soldier.
Right. That's
That
the
that
association you assume.
that's all I think about. But when he
Mhm.
explained like my upbringing and the violence and trauma and abuse of my adolescence, he's like, "You that is your PTSD. Like, you have survival methods that you depend on and that you resort
Mhm.
to protect yourself, to get through these moments." And a lot of it for me was tapping that defense mechanism to survive moments. So, I think when you said, in the kitchen, I could just hustle through it. I could just work my way through it. I could out hustle the situation. That's a defense mechanism. And when you realize that
100%.
you're relying on these defense mechanisms, it kind of changes your thought process of, do I have to still rely on those defense mechanisms? Because what I learned in my story, and I'm gonna ask you this question as well, is I didn't realize that there was other ways of getting through situations. I would always tap pain. I was always tap hurt. I would always tap anger to level up, right? To get through this next struggle that I got to get through. I personally didn't feel like I deserved love. So I want to ask you that question. Do you feel like you deserve love?
Yeah, that's been a core question for me. I don't have the full answer, but I'll give you some just raw brain dump here because I'm still in that place of trying to sort through the pieces. And I'll take you back a little bit. I'm a firstborn son of very entrepreneurial family and eldest of four siblings, type A personality, red arsonist, whatever the most intense personality trait in any of those tests, I'm that. So that's kind of where I was coming from originally as far as like my approach. I have always had to prove
Mhm.
that I was the best, whatever it was. And that being best was about the only way that I would allow myself to be like, okay, now I'm enough. Only when you're best. And you're only best, if that's even a real thing, for the most fleeting moment you could ever imagine,
Yeah,
right? You win something tomorrow, nobody really cares. And it's not actually defining of you, but that's all that mattered to me. So my just, you know, who I am on a daily basis, no. I that person to me still is hard to grapple with that I can just be and be loved.
mhm,
I have to have something to hold to prove to you that I'm worthy of it. And that's a lot of that is wrapped in the self-esteem of having immense confidence and feeling like I have no confidence at the same time. It's very, very polarizing when it comes to that. So that's where I'm at right now. I don't know exactly how to just be and be okay with that and allow somebody else to say that's good enough.
yeah. I mean, that's pressure, man, right? And
That's a lot of pressure.
it's
It's
so
like
much pressure.
it caves in your chest. It does
Well,
for me.
and when you think about pressure too, right? To use a kitchen analogy, think about a pressure cooker, right? You have this airtight rubber seal with this secured lid, and then on top of that is a weight that you place to keep that pressure in. And then you apply heat to the bottom to build up the pressure until it has nowhere to escape. So it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And like at some point, this is gonna blow, right?
Yeah, what is
It-
that? What is that exhaust on there? Like,
well,
for us
think about
as
this.
humans?
Think about this part. In order to release that pressure that we're carrying, that we have on our shoulders, that we feel every day, being leaders, being husbands,
Mm.
being fathers, being in positions of life that require us to prove how great we are. The only way to vent that pressure is for somebody else to push that button on the top.
Yeah, because 'cause you're in it.
So who's releasing your valve, right? Who's going to let that pressure escape? Like who are you trusting to be able to kind of hit that button and say, dude, take some of this off of me, please,
Mhm.
because I'm building, I'm building, I'm building. And eventually you're gonna hit this perfect storm, which it sounds like, you might have hit. For me, mine was Top Chef Kentucky. I hit a perfect storm of uh not being accepted, losing, being put in a mindset of constant negligence and disregard. And it just ate away at everything I had bundled up and all that pressure that I had that I've been carrying, that I've been running from. It took its toll, man. And I broke, which is what led to my suicide attempt on Top Chef,
Mhm. Mm.
which is why I'll never be on Top Chef again because I wasn't in a good mental state to be in that show and be in that setting, and I didn't realize it. Like, I thought I was good. Like, I
Yeah,
run I run
right.
restaurants, I run millions of dollars every day.
Easy.
This is easy, and I
Mhm.
got put in a position where it was this perfect storm that broke me, and that was my turning point. And it's been, that was 2018, so it's been 6 years of
Wow.
finding my
6
story and
years.
finding my confidence and finding my love for myself, right? It's not even about other people right now. A lot of it is about myself. Like, I gotta be able to look at the mirror and say, "Dude, you deserve love.
Yeah,
I love you,
facts.
and I like you." Like, and until you can get to that point, that's where you know you gotta keep doing the work.
Yeah, 6 years, I'm shocked it's been that long. Well, I gotta say, the pressure release valve is something that I realized that exists for the first time ever. I didn't know that that was a thing, right? I didn't
You can't
ever
push it from the inside.
I didn't ever even consider pushing it or asking somebody to push
Yeah.
it, like, never even
You're
crossed
good
my
in you're
mind.
good in your environment.
Yeah, I felt comfortable
Mhm.
in that pressure. I felt like I could handle it where other people couldn't, and I'm always a glass half full type person as well, so I was like, "This is what it's supposed to feel like.
Yeah, and think about how
I can take
unstable
that."
that environment is.
Oh,
Like,
it's unreal.
and we live in that, right? We're comfortable in that. Not everybody is like chefs, which is what makes us so different, but a lot of it is because we're so broken.
Yeah, and it's why we're
And
so susceptible
we're
to
totally good with
so
that.
many issues.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because we know that pain, we know that struggle, we know that pressure. That is not a struggle at all for us, but
yeah.
that environment is so unstable. When it tips and it transitions, you
Yeah, the whole I
you're
mean,
not ready for
that
that,
pressure
man.
cooker doesn't just release the pressure, it
It
explodes.
explodes, man. That is the worst weeds you will ever experience, is
Yeah,
when your pressure cooker bursts.
and it's not if, it's when.
Yeah,
It
it's gonna
is
happen.
it's when. And that's the part that was so hard for me to grapple with, is like I could always bob and weave. I could always apply pressure in the right places for myself or for the team or for the business or whatever it might be. And I couldn't conceptualize the release valve, because now I'm realizing there was moments where was able to shift pressure.
Mhm.
I do that a lot internally within a team, for example, thinking that that actually relieved pressure. It didn't. You're just putting the pressure into other places and it still builds up. But in our minds, that pressure is no longer on the ticket rail.
Yeah.
so to speak, right? It has been moved away, so now it no longer exists, and we're able to kind of really push that away. And so now having, yeah, knowing that there is a pressure release valve, and I need people around me professionally and personally to do so. I mean, it's important. And today, my gratitude is to you because today you're helping to release that pressure, and the trust that I have with you is immense because you have been sharing your story. So I'm hoping that from you and I sharing our combined stories, and for me getting this vulnerable for the first time ever, and in this type of medium, one more person, right, picks up that mantle and says, "Okay, I need some help. I need to think about my life, my actions, my pressure cooker differently." And that means a lot. Like that, I know somebody is going to not explode because we're having this conversation, brother. So I know I
Yeah.
don't have to tell you how important that is, but I feel honored and grateful that we're able to have this conversation.
No, it's so so important, man, and I'm honored as well just to be a part of the conversation. You know, too many times we put out fires instead of preventing them.
Yeah. Oh man. We
Like,
set the fires and then put them out and then pat ourselves on the back that we put
yeah,
out a fire.
like when you could have just prevented the entire environment from catching on fire. Like, don't
100%.
light the fire in the first place. And
100%.
I think that's the biggest piece when it comes to our mental health is like, how can we prevent some of these breaks? How can we prevent some of these conversations that people go through because they're so lost in their pain and they're so lost in
Mhm.
their own struggle. This is where we see the addictions. This is where we see the drugs and the
Yes.
alcohol and
Yes.
everything that happens. Like you're just numbing the pain until the next episode or the next shift. And honestly, like I knew for me personally, a year, I'm at almost 15 months now. 15 months ago, I was so depressed with what I was going through. I had just closed a restaurant, um, not in the good way, and
Mhm.
I had broken my foot. I had multiple surgeries, so I couldn't walk.
That's right.
I was almost 300 pounds, and I was disconnected from everyone. And I was dark, man. I was so dark, and I was lost, and I was trying to put on a front, and I knew I needed to make a change. And when I reached out to a friend, I was like, I was asking him about like helping me with my physical fitness, but really I was asking to get some
Mhm.
help with my mental
Mhm.
fitness.
Mhm.
And I was too scared to ask him that part. So I would, kind of deviate and say, "Hey, I got to lose this weight. What can you do? You're a trainer." And he was like, "Brother, you just got to heal before we can do anything with like physical." And that's not what I wanted to hear. So, conversations with the mirror for me really became about I've got to create lifestyle changes and I got to do the things I don't want to do if I'm going to create lifestyle changes. And it was drinking. Like it wasn't that I was a drunk. I mean, I guess all chefs have that capability and we lie to ourselves a lot about how much we actually drink.
Yeah,
But
fact.
it was like, a glass of wine turns into a bottle, a shot of tequila turns into a few more shots of tequila. Like,
Mhm.
and then it's just nonstop drinking every day. But I also realized a lot of that was leading to my decision making and the numbness that I was getting from drinking was forcing me to ignore or was allowing me to ignore everything that I was feeling. So I made the
Yeah.
decision to stop drinking. And of course, it's on a weekend where I went to Chef's Roll. Like I went to San Diego to do a demo and I'm at a chef's conference
Temptation.
the weekend I stopped drinking. So I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by, 300 chefs partying. And yeah, that was my first weekend. And I
How'd you
can't even
do?
dude, I'm 15 months in right now.
Okay,
And
you didn't have a lapse there and start the clock over.
no, no, it was this was kind of like you talked about, like you have to be able to out hustle the situation. For me, that was almost like a personal challenge. Like, can I get through this weekend?
Mhm. Right.
And as I got through that weekend, then it was like, okay, can I get through the next 30 days? And honestly, like I'm at a point now where I feel so in control of my life because I'm so clear with my thoughts and my approach that I can't justify to myself why I want to drink. Like, when I get a craving, like, "Oh, I want beer," or "I want a glass of wine," I know it's not about the education. I've tasted all this stuff, and I've been to these vineyards, and I've been to these distilleries, like, I know what all this shit tastes like.
Yeah,
So it's not
right.
about education.
That's what we tell
That's what
ourselves.
we tell ourselves, right? "Oh,
Oh, yeah.
I have to do it for work. I gotta taste this for work, and then I'm
Mhm.
drunk." So it's like, I know it's not about the education, so what is it? Is it the social anxiety? Like, I feel like I need to be included? And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, I've got a
Love it.
spritzer in my hand. Like, I'm fine. I've got something in my hand, and I'll even put it in a wine glass so people think I'm drinking something, just to shut them up or make them feel more comfortable.
Oh,
But now it's like,
you find yourself trying to, in those social situations, not awkwardly be the one not drinking?
yeah, like I said,
Mm,
people get uncomfortable about it, so
yeah.
it's weird. But you know that goes away really quick because they're drinking, and then they go from here to here.
And then it
So
turns out they're not paying attention to
yeah,
you at all.
yeah,
They
and then
don't
that's
care.
usually when I bounce because I'm like, oh man, everybody's getting a little tipsy. I'm getting out of here
I
because
understand
it's
that.
just
Can I
annoying.
yeah. Can I tell you something pretty contradictory to, like, to what you're talking about right now as far as kind of the progression and downward spiral goes? So I'm coming up on 2 years, without drinking, and this wasn't a I'm in the depths of it, I have a problem. I just decided one day that I hadn't actually had a drink for 6 months, and I didn't even realize, or 7 months, and
Mhm.
hadn't even realized. I was like, "Wow, when's the last time I did have a drink?" And it just
Yeah.
naturally went that way, and then I took on the challenge. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go a year." Like,
Mhm.
now I'm not gonna drink for a year, and came up to the holiday times, and that's usually when I have some whiskeys and a cigar with, like, friends and family, stuff like that, and that first, winter was the only time that was, like, really tough because I felt like I was taking away from the festivities. I was like,
Mm.
"Man, if I'm not drinking and jolly having a good time, then I'm not contributing, I'm actually taking away from those memories and those
Yeah.
moments." What's now interesting with the timing that completely seems backwards is that depression, we've kind of traced it backwards, and it started with kind of one seminal event and then a cascade of events, and it just completely unraveled and derailed over about a year, a little
Mhm.
over a year, and I wasn't drinking during that time. So, I've tried to joke with my therapist about it. I was like, "Oh, I guess I shouldn't have quit drinking because that was the timing was the catalyst." Obviously, that's not true, but that's when the timing happened, and I think because my mind was clear from not drinking, now all of that pressure had to be released, and so that's what actually happened. It
Yeah.
wasn't in the midst of the drinking that I realized that I had hit rock bottom. It was because I stopped drinking that finally there was no fog.
Mhm.
Finally, there was nowhere to hide, so to
Yes.
speak. And then it was a long journey because all of these new thoughts and feelings I was having, I was able to just push aside as like, "Oh, now I'm not drinking, now I'm not partying, now I'm not this, I'm not that." So I'm just, having to move through all of
Mm.
these unfamiliar things, but I wasn't giving them any credence whatsoever,
Yeah.
and I had
This
no
is the
idea.
piece they don't talk about, right?
Yeah,
This is the part they don't talk about,
big
which
time.
is they don't talk about this part, which is you have to deal with what you got going on inside because you're not numb anymore, right?
Yeah.
You don't have like I've had to deal with so much of my stuff a year in. And that's really when it was like, fuck, man, I didn't realize like I was carrying all this stuff, but I'm so clear headed now. I'm aware of it and I've got to deal with it and I've got to fight my way through these struggles. And the liquor would have just made me push it off. So I get that completely, man.
Yeah, there's a false assumption that when you stop drinking, that's fixing the problem, like, that was the problem, and the drinking and drugs and partying and all of that isn't the problem, it's the byproduct of the problem, and so it's directly linked, yet dealing with with the actual act of it doesn't even start, and the reality is that, in my case, made it worse, so to speak, because now there was all this raw and real emotion, this raw and real reality that I was unwilling and unable to deal with, and so there was just a long, slow downward spiral, and I had no idea I was going downhill.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm starting to make better decisions, So I'm actually on the upward trajectory, and that was not the reality. And so it was really insidious and slow burn. That's the thing, brother. It was slow burning. And now I realize all these things that happened. And there's many things that I don't realize happened in this. There's constantly things where somebody will say something to me. I was like, that didn't happen. They're like, what are you talking about? Now I have to say, anybody else tells me something that went down or went down in a way that I didn't recognize or realize, I'm having to just say yes and accept that and then deal with that, because even my memory is untrustworthy. And that's kind of a scary thing, because again, when you I mean, it's another restaurant thing. I remember learning sushi early on, and they said you got to be fast and have a great memory. I was like, "What do you mean a great memory?" Like, you got to remember, like, you got the next 12 rolls that are need to be in your head already, and you need to be cooking them, making them in your head before you ever even start touching the ingredients. I remember that, and so I've always tried to have that strong memory. And now I'm just like, don't trust my own memory.
Yeah.
Is a really it seems like a little thing. But when the reality of who you are as a person is the culmination of all of your memories, and now you can't even trust those, that is dark.
Yeah.
It's really, really scary and troubling. And so when you think about, like, 12 steps and stuff like that, making amends type thing, I know I have to go on an amends tour at some point. I'm still so deep in it that I don't even know how to bridge those conversations sometimes. I will. I
Yeah.
have to. I have to at some point. And then to just have that spiral down, down, slower and slower. And then I remember, so let's just like timeline this for people. We're talking, kind of the drinking stopped in winter around Christmas of 2022. And then 23 is when it really started to go downhill. By the summer of 23, I was a complete wreck. Thought I was doing an amazing job, whatever that meant. Betsy had to have kind of a, like an ultimatum type conversation with me. And the very next day after that conversation with Betsy, for the first time in my life, brother, I thought about hurting myself.
Mm.
First time ever. Never would have thought about it. And I have thought about it nearly every single day since, including still to this day.
Yeah.
And that is unbelievable. And for that to finally culminate in me trying to take my own life makes no sense to me even now when I think about it. It was so nonchalant. It was so calculated. It was so, like, cold the way that I went about this, that I even was like, "Oh, logically, this is the best time and way and to do this because it'll have the least impact or the best effect on my family." And I like, if you're thinking like that,
Yeah.
that you're thinking about taking your own life and no longer being a part of your family's life, and you're thinking about that logically and rationally and calculated,
Yeah.
you're gone, like
Yeah.
completely gone. And that was where I ended up, where it just I was like, okay, yeah, today's the right day because of all of these circumstances that make the most sense. Today's the day for that. And I was very, yeah, like disconnected from the gravity of what I was thinking in that moment. And you mentioned something earlier about that church setting. I'm not religious at all, and still am not, yet that day I for sure I'm not going to talk about all the details, but there was like a divine intervention type thing. If I've ever experienced that day, and you and I talking now was 100% like something that never could have happened, should have happened, would have happened that day to stop me. And that's an unbelievable feeling too, that somehow, you're like, all right, somebody's looking out for me,
Yeah.
because I'm not looking out for myself.
No. And
And
that's the piece, man, is somebody's looking out for you.
yeah,
Divine intervention, it happens for a reason. When when I swallowed that bottle of pills after drinking that bottle of whiskey in that hotel room by myself, and I started to believe the lies that I was telling myself.
Mhm.
'Cause that's the piece, is the lies that you're telling yourself you're beginning to believe. You're just reinforcing them over and over in your head of, "You're not good enough, you don't
Yeah.
deserve to be here,
They're the
people will
only
be
thing that's
better off
real.
with you." Yeah, it just eats away. I mean, this is why most of us drown out the sound with the busyness of work and the busyness of music, and we don't wanna hear that voice that's inside of us, and we begin to believe those lies, and when I did that and I woke up the next morning not expecting to,
Mm.
on the television, I'll never forget this, on the television, it was, a news report breaking, and through my stupor, right, that hangover, coming to awareness, I caught the segment, and Anthony Bourdain had died that night in a hotel room, had taken his own life, and I'll never forget that. Like, when we talk about divine intervention, that was one of those moments where a chef who we all know, we all respected, we all admired as far as his words and his work, had been going through the same thing I was going through the night before, except he had succeeded and I had not. Why?
I don't know if that word "succeeded" is true,
True.
you know?
But I'll never
Like
forget catching my own eye contact in a mirror next to the bed, and
mm,
I started to cry. I lost it so hard because I had so much shame, and when I saw myself, like, the shame was, like, the real part, and I just asked to leave. I didn't go too in depth with production and, the therapist of why I needed to leave, but I knew I needed to leave that setting, and it's why I departed Top Chef Kentucky the way I did. Even when I got home, I didn't talk about it. I just said, I thought about it. I didn't actually say that I tried to do it. And it wasn't until I really got into writing my book and putting that down on paper to where I
yeah.
shared in detail that story.
Mhm.
And when my wife read that story, the hurt and the pain that it caused was like something I wasn't prepared for, because, you know, the realization is like I made a selfish decision to say, I'm done and I'm checking out on you. And like that part for me is something I don't ever want to put her ever again through. And regardless of where I'm at in my story, I can't be that selfish for a split
Yeah.
second decision. There's as someone who lost a father at a very young age and was raised without one, and as someone who has had family members who have committed suicide, and you still to this day have no idea why, and you won't get that
Mhm.
confirmation of why. Why did
Yeah.
she leave? Why is she not here anymore? I can't bring myself to do that because I'm scared of dealing with what I've got going on inside, and I'm telling myself lies and using that as my reason why this is a good time.
Man, and the lies that you tell yourself are so powerful, and they're so insidious that you are able to completely shift your reality. Like the power that your mind has over your mind, your actions, your choices, your thoughts is unbelievable to me. And to be able to be in a situation where I did the math and the math said this was the right outcome is fucking unreal.
Yeah.
Like I can't now even fathom how I thought that was reality. I understand now how I got to that point, and I understand why I felt so helpless, why I felt like that was the only, path that I had. But to your point, it's not it's not just my journey, right? The journey, and I have a wife and 3 kids and family, and I even struggle with I've had hard times in my life. But right now, in this moment, in the moment over the last year and a half, wasn't those moments. things were okay in the sense of, like, if you take this moment and think that it only exists in a vacuum, it doesn't. Your life at any given moment is a culmination of so many different things. So I even feel guilty often where it's like, well, I didn't hit rock bottom and things weren't so bad that there was no other choice that I could imagine. Things were okay and I still made that choice. And that also seems so selfish and entitled that, like, I get to make a decision like that when some people are at a place where they think there is no other decision that they could make, and I had lots of other options. I wasn't the poster kid for this guy is deeply depressed and is obviously going to hurt themselves. And so I struggle with that as well. Like, it's like the trauma Olympics. Like, who gets to, live in that pain and then make these kinds of choices?
Yeah.
Somebody else has more pain than I do. I know that for sure. But I also am trying not to think like that during kind of recovery and therapy, because then I can just push it aside and say, well, it's not as bad as somebody else, so I don't have to deal with it. That's for somebody else to deal with. And
Yeah.
that's a really, I think, dangerous place, challenging place to be when you're trying to be on the come up.
My wife and I were talking last night, and we were talking about a nephew of ours, and we were discussing kind of like his relationship with his dad, and I couldn't see her perspective because I would do anything to have my father here,
Mm,
like as a boy, a young boy who was raised without a dad. I would kill for those moments, regardless of how bad or how tough or how hard they were. I would kill for those moments. I would kill
mm,
for the sound. I would kill for the affirmation. I would kill for the hug. Like, regardless of what we're going through, like, sometimes we have to remember to see the joy in life. And I think as someone who has been through a lot of pain and a lot of death, I see the joy in life every moment, and I'm choosing to see the joy in life and the excitement of life and the beauty of life, because it is a short run. Like, in the long term of things,
right.
it's not. We have a very limited amount of time, and tomorrow's not promised. So, like,
Yeah.
why would you lose sight of how beautiful this world is and everything you get to do in it and experience and the impact that you get to make? I mean, I find so much joy, right? Because I think happiness is what happens externally and joy is what happens internally.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
find so much joy in people. And whether that's my 12, my circle, or that's the people that I get to be around in a professional setting, or even a personal setting. I find so much joy in my ability to have presence and impact. And it's simply that I now value my presence, and I didn't value my presence before. Like, people want to be around you. People want to experience you. People want to hear your opinions and your thoughts, regardless of how they take it. They still want you around, and I think it's important to remember that, hear that, because at some point it's gonna happen. So you have to live every single moment and write every single word of every single chapter.
Hmm. I think for me, I'm still in it a little bit because I think I'm very guarded. Is there was a level of apathy that set in for me where all of my passion, joy, happiness, and stuff was just sucked completely out of me. I
Hmm.
couldn't acknowledge it. Everything was meh at best, and at worst, this is just sucking the life out of me. Every moment that could have been joyous, and that apathy where I just didn't give a shit about anything. And I mentioned glass half full. I'm a very passion driven, purpose driven, meaning driven type person, and that was completely left me. And that is just such a lonely place to be.
Yeah.
where no engagement, no interaction that should bring you, could bring you, has in the past brought you joy, happiness, even intrigue, some interest. There was just none of it for so long. And that is exhausting. Where every day you wake up going, how many hours of this do I have to endure before I get to go back to bed?
Yeah.
And that got exhausting for me.
Well, it
Doing
makes
nothing and being nothing was exhausting, and it's
yeah.
unreal to think about it that way, but it's true.
It's especially like I think you get this as a chef. You get to a point of climbing the ladder to where you've owned restaurants, you've led restaurants, you are the boss to where you've lost the connection to the passion of why you got into this. Right? It's
Mhm.
just not as when money's involved, it's not as beautiful as it was.
Facts.
And we can talk on that on a whole nother podcast episode. But for me, I've found that I have this current reconnection with food right now. And I had to really dig deep on why am I doing this? Like what is this all about? And as I've sat with my team and re-engaged myself with my leadership and my team and asked myself, like, why are we doing this? It's created this newfound connection to the study and excitement of cooking, which I haven't had in a long time. I've backed out of TV for a reason. I've backed out of a lot of the limelight for a reason. I've talked on mental health and been on stages talking about it because I was healing, right? This is what I was going through, kind of like what you said, like you're deflecting. So, I was dealing with the stuff that I was going on, but as I've rediscovered these whys, it's re-sparked this curiosity. And I think that part is super exciting of what
Mhm.
are you curious about and what do you wanna learn
Yeah,
about? Like, honestly, DJing for me is one of those things
I've
that
seen that, man, that's great.
dude, it's
Yo,
so funny because I love
yo.
music. I love music, right? I'm a huge music head, whether that's electronic or that's hip hop, like, I love music. I got into the turntables because I needed a distraction with my hands and my head, right? And what better than to put headphones on to distract me from the world and then to occupy myself with something with my hands. It's just like cooking for me. And as I've gotten into playing music and playing parties and curating playlists, right? All I'm doing is curating experiences. I'm taking you from here to here to here to
Mm.
here,
Yeah,
back down to here, back up to here. Like
all
I'm just
interconnected.
just like you do with a menu, right? And as I've gotten that connection of distraction with my turntables, it's re-engaged me with the food because now I'm thinking about the food differently because I'm thinking about the music playlist differently. So you've got to find these like curiosity pieces to help re-engage you because man, I haven't had this excitement for cooking in a long time. And we're talking 30 years in. Like it's a different mindset.
Oh, see, that's something that I'm in the search of right now is kind of that purpose and meaning piece and the things that do at least have the potential to bring me joy, right? I'm still skeptical, I'm still guarded, but that have the potential. And and speaking in this way, just bringing my voice to, bringing that announcer voice to the people is something that I really enjoy doing. And so I started putting myself on that path. I've been coaching youth sports for my sons for a little bit, for a little while, little league and stuff, and find some happiness in that for sure. And now I'm going to be calling this next week. I have my first call of a high school game, so I'm gonna be calling games and stuff for for high school. And we moved. We're no longer in Denver. We're in Des Moines, Iowa now, and back close to family and some friends. And so I'll be calling some games out here. I'm taking online classes next semester at Dan Patrick's School of Sportscasting at Full Sail University.
It's
So
awesome.
I'm I'm trying, man. I'm trying to find some things and using my voice and helping to bring other people some entertainment and joy is something that I think I've always gotten something out of. It's why I think I gravitated towards food. That gratification loop closes pretty quickly when you're able to, blow somebody's socks off with the food that you prepare for them. And
Mhm.
got a little bit of that taste and during Thanksgiving here, got to feed the family and do some of that. So I'm finding those moments and I'm trying to sit with them longer. Like I'm very quick to move on to the next thing. I'm
Yeah,
very quick to kind of be a futurist and be like, I already created that. Now what's the next thing that I can create?
yeah. You look ahead
And
instead of looking up and looking around.
I'm trying to spend more time looking around.
Yeah.
100%. I am still going to be the kind of person who has an eye on the horizon, but I need to stay present.
Dude, I climbed the incline recently, and
Mm,
you're from Colorado. You
mhm.
get that. The incline is over 2,000 steps straight up at like a 60% incline up the side of a mountain on some
No
old
joke.
railroad ties. And I hadn't done it since I was like in my 20s. I was a young kid the last time I did it. My team wanted to do it for sober week, so I was like, fine, I'll do it. So I start hiking up this thing, and I can't tell you how cleansing it was for my soul and these aha moments that I had along the way of this hour walk up the side of this mountain. And what kept being reinforced was to stop midway through the trail and look back at how far I had walked, because everything in front of me seemed like impossible and it was so far away. But I
Mm,
knew I'd be able to get it. I can get to that. I can achieve that. It's a goal, but it's fucking hard. It's so hard to
mhm.
walk up that thing. And I just kept stopping and looking around and appreciating where I was. And I kept looking back to see how far I had walked. And when I reached the top and I looked at that goal, man, it was one of those things of like, it's fine to chase goals and it's fine to achieve them, but don't forget the path and the journey and how many steps you've walked. Like that is an accomplishment in itself. And you've got to be proud and celebrate those wins on top of the achievement. Like you've got to celebrate the journey because that
Yeah.
it's your journey, right?
Yeah, I've
Nobody
been so
walked those steps.
destination focused, right? Destination focused, whereas, like, the journey is the journey. Like, that is the whole reason for it, and I think, it's easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah, look how far you've walked, man. You've walked so far and
Ooh,
you've done so many cool things that you've got to celebrate those and appreciate those because you've got so many more ahead of you. And like that's the exciting part is, I told my wife, I was like, I think I've achieved all my goals. And I posted this yesterday. I said, I think I've achieved all my goals. She goes, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like,
better get some new goals.
and I've been writing new goals ever since, and I keep going after them, and I keep achieving them, and I keep going on these journeys. And finally, the other day, she told me, she said, "Okay, stop writing goals, because now you're a
You're
DJ, and you're an
you're good.
author, and you're a
You're good.
speaker, and you're a restaurant owner, and you're on television, and you're doing all this crazy stuff, and I can't keep up with you." But it's so powerful because I'm goal oriented, but I'm enjoying the journey to the goal more than I am the achievement of the goal.
Yeah, and even the way that you said that I think is good for me. Now I'm literally looking at one of my notepads. I was like, I better write some damn goals. Brother just set the bar, you know what I mean? And it's like the if the destination is so important, writing those goals and putting those goals down on paper is something that I've always done. I haven't done it as much recently because I've been scared of my goals. And
Yeah,
I've found myself through kind of therapy and some of this stuff trying to put too much pressure again on this process.
yeah,
And so I've had to be really patient. And they're like, "Look, however long you were in that dark space, it's gonna take an equal amount of time just to get back to 0."
yeah,
And so I'm like, "Oh, man, like, I gotta wait and wait and wait,"
yeah,
and it feels like not enough is happening, and I'm so action oriented, and I'm so goal oriented and destination oriented that, like, what is all this minutia stuff? I'm having to spend time with it, and so, it feels like I'm taking one step up that incline, and then I'm just there waiting for the next thing to happen, and my patience is being tested more than maybe anything, which I think is good. I think is necessary for me at this moment to have the patience and the endurance to kind of take your metaphor there for the within the incline is like there's a lot more steps to take and, I'm okay with that now.
Yeah.
That's one of the few things I'm okay with. Alright, I'm gonna have to take a lot of steps,
Yeah. But you're not
and
scared of the work, right? You're a
not
chef
scared
and
of the work.
you're not scared of the work. That's the
No,
piece. You've got to
yeah,
get excited about the work now, right? When you know you've got a
that's the
busy
part.
weekend
Yeah,
coming, you know you've written those prep lists, you got to get excited about coming in and just putting knife to cutting board. Like that excitement is what I think a lot of us miss when we get so kind of burnt within our lives. And that's just using
mhm,
kitchen as an analogy. But like you got to get excited about the work because you're not scared of the work. You know you can accomplish the work. You just you're not excited about like the challenge that's about to happen because it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be so fucking
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, day at a time is a real thing. It sounds so cliche. It is so cliche, yet I'm like really working on understanding that this was such a big deal for me for us to talk today. And so, I'm like, if I don't do anything else today, I made a massive leap forward, and I've been really trying to own that since we set this date a couple weeks ago that this was important, circled on the calendar type date because it's one of the moments that will allow me to continue to use my voice in a meaningful and impactful way, even if I have to be humbled by it.
Yeah,
That and those two things have always lived in contradiction. I have to be the best. I can't be humbled and be small and be the best at the same time. But in this moment, being humble, starting at that first step for myself and allowing other people to know that I'm only on the first step
mm,
is incredibly challenging for me as it eats at who I think I am at my core. And the reality is, if I'm willing to be strong enough to admit that I'm at the first step and still use my voice to make an impact, well, then I might be onto something.
yeah, man, you are definitely onto something. The fact that you've started these conversations, you've started to embrace the realization that you're broken and it's okay, right? Talking about your mental health does not make you look weak, right? That is such a win, and you got to celebrate that win, and you've got to embrace this journey. Because if there's anything I can tell you, is most of my career I chased validation.
Yo, man.
I needed validation. I needed approval, and I've learned from many years of therapy, the loss of a father and a father figure is why I needed personally a lot of that self assurance. I needed a lot of that validation, and I thought I would find it in my career. I thought I would find it in the restaurants. I thought I would find it on television and becoming a celebrity. I chased it, man. But
Mhm.
here's what I've come to the conclusion is I'm good enough. I'm awesome.
Hell yeah.
And I don't need anyone's approval except the mirror. I need to like what I see. I need to embrace who I am. I need to love this one of a kind recipe that no one can recreate, nobody can beat.
Facts.
And dude, they can't be you. Nobody can be
Yeah.
you. So you've got to
They not us.
they are not like us. And I think that is such an important piece to remember is you don't need other people's approval. Um, you need to keep a good circle around you who's going to keep you humble and keep you on path and keep you
Mhm.
straight up, but the validation, you're already good enough. And I tell people that all the time. Like, you don't need these TV shows and you don't need these accolades to tell you that you're good enough. But it's nothing wrong with chasing them and achieving them, but
Of course.
don't get caught up in the validation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a thin line of knowing that you're allowed to chase and you're allowed to have a big vision and a grand goals. You're allowed to have that. And you're allowed to achieve those things and have success. It can't be about that validation. It can't be transactional.
Hmm.
And that's where I got spun on my axis because part of it, the restaurant industry teaches us to be so transactional. And so we took these transactions that happen in a restaurant and I took them and started applying them to me as a person. And that's dangerous. That's toxic. And that leads to so many of the mental health issues that I'm now dealing with and that I know more broadly we deal with in this industry because we can't be transactional as humans. It's
Yeah.
not the way that we're built. It's not how relationships are built. And in restaurants, the reality is we're in the relationship business. It's the most unique business that there is. And yet we commoditize it and we make it transactional, and then we turn ourselves into the byproduct of those transactions. It's uh,
Yeah.
it's I don't know what it is. I just recognize it now, and now I'm kind of pissed about it. And now I was like, I fed that monster for so long.
Yeah, well, many of us let our careers define our presence,
Of course.
right? We are. Am I talking to chef or am I talking to brother?
Mm,
Right, and my identity was heavily based in my identity as my profession of being a chef because I was so insecure as brother. So
yeah.
you know what I mean? You've created this facade to go back to what we started with. You've created
Yes.
this facade because you're uncomfortable with who you are as a person. So the facade is somebody you've created that you know people are going to respect and people are going to listen to and they're going to embrace. And then we start to live through that facade instead of finding the bridge between those two
Mm.
people. And when my wife asked me, "Am I talking to brother? Am I talking to chef right now?" I knew that was a moment where
Damn,
I had
that
to
hits
knock that
hard.
wall down.
Ooh.
I can't be these two people.
Yeah. I did that on a surface level. I took the chef out of Chef Jensen Cummings on Instagram and TikTok and all that, and was like, "Can I just be Jensen Cummings?" Uh, the answer was no. I couldn't. I wasn't able to do that at that point. I made that I don't know. Maybe it's a grand gesture, maybe it's social media, so who cares? But it definitely was identity
Yeah,
that I was seeking when I created Chef Jensen Cummings, and now I was unraveling a little bit of that. It's same with probably the stopping the drinking and then dropping Chef Jensen Cummings, and like I was unraveling my identity, and that's all that I had,
yeah,
right? And that reputation was all that I had, and and I don't think that my reputation is tarnished per se. I think I have to work on it, and I have to realize what it is, and I have to reinvent parts of myself, and I'm gonna have to go and make some amends for sure. But the journey now is like this is the journey. So I'm on the come up again, which was always the most exciting part of the journey for me.
yeah,
So like I'm in a place where I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have to be the one who knows everything. I don't have to be the expert. I don't have to be everything for everyone.
yeah.
I
Well,
could
and
just be
just remember
me
too,
for the
man,
people that need me.
you don't have to eliminate chef, right? Because your past is a big piece of who you are,
Mhm.
but it's not who you have to become. And I think
That's
that needs you need
nuggets.
bro, therapy. Uh,
Yo.
it is though, you know,
Man,
my adolescent hoodlum background is not who I have to
same.
become.
Yeah.
My chef, angry, you know, get through the weeds and create a hostile work environment is not who I have to become. I get to keep shaping and changing this story every single day, and I'm becoming a happier person for it. But I'm embracing my past, man. It is a big piece of who I am. I just have to understand it more, and I need to
Yeah.
consider it, be considerate of like how those things have affected me. You know, we call it timeline. Like a lot of my book is my timeline. I went through my story and I looked at the moments that wounded me and I assess them to better understand who I am today so I can change my future to how I want it to be. But I had
Mm.
to look at my past and say, here's my wounds. Here's what my dad did to me. Here's what my mom did to me. Here's what happened to me in this neighborhood. Here's what happened to me in my career. Here's what happened to me by this boss. Like all these wounds is what shaped me to today and why I broke, but I needed to go back and explore them. So that's a whole big piece of why I wrote that book was I needed to understand my story.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I see this for myself as well in what you're saying because I know it's the way that I'm going to do things. I mean, this show is is an extension of that. Is I'm going to chronicle and tell this story in so many different ways and on different mediums and platforms. So, like, the you writing the book as part of therapy, or DJing, or all make a lot of sense to me because they're a creative outlet.
Mhm.
They're a communication outlet, and I'm the same way. Like, I have to find a way to amplify whatever I'm doing in a way that allows other people to see it or be a part of it, learn from it, enjoy it, whatever it might be. So that, to me, I'll be riding your coattails a lot, I think, in this process, because you're ahead of me in this process. If that's an actual thing, I don't know how you get ahead or behind, but
I'm where I'm at, and you're where you're at, and
yeah.
there's no race, man. You're a race against
There's
yourself.
no that's see, even that, like, look, I instantly put myself in a place where it's like, okay, I need to benchmark myself of, like, am I, going to be okay? Well, if brother's 6 years in and he's here, like, it's hard not to,
Yeah.
right? It's hard not to in this because it's so unknown to us. I
Mhm.
don't know what the next step is supposed to be, and I spent so many years, you spent so many years being chef where everybody looked to us to know what the next step was,
Yeah.
and we knew what the next step was. And
Mhm.
now we're having to grapple with, am I chef or am I Jensen? The same kind of thing. What I have come to realize, recognize, and accept is that I think if you're chef, you're always chef, kind of like you're always coach to the
Yeah.
people you had an impact on,
Absolutely.
and that's good enough for me.
Dude, that is such a great chapter. So, as you're working on these podcasts, transcribe them, and you've literally just written a chapter. Like, you literally have a
Right.
chapter of your moment to talk about where you were from a public persona and putting it out there on social media. Like this, I wrote so many of my chapters in my book through my podcast. Like the whole No Lux Given podcast was
Yeah.
me speaking to my co-writer to
Right.
give him because I didn't have time. I was busy. I was
Right.
running restaurants. So I'm like, dude, I got to do a podcast anyway. I'm going to talk about these subjects so you can just transcribe them and then put them on a docket, and then we'll go back and read them, and then we'll name them a chapter, and then we'll figure out where they fit in the story. Like
I think
you're,
that's 100% what I'm doing too.
yeah,
I was like,
it's
I can't go and just write in my journal. Like, that's not the way that I communicate.
use the
Uh,
technology.
but I'm gonna use this platform, this forum, and something that I enjoy and have ability in. This is exactly what I'm doing. This is literally, yes, we are writing the chapter. This is, I don't know if it's chapter one, but it's the first chapter that
Yeah.
I've been willing and able to write
I
down
rearranged them all day long,
all
like,
day. Right.
all day long, and this
Yeah.
was the moment that it hit me. I gave a speech at a high school to a bunch of kids,
Mm.
and, within like 30, 40 minutes of my, speech, an hour speech that I gave these kids, they had my speech verbatim typed up and sent out on a newsletter, and I was like, "How the heck did that" dude, that is exactly what I just and I didn't even have that
It'd be
written down.
work.
I didn't realize, like and this was where I really started to see, like, AI being introduced,
Yeah.
but that's what they did. They just transcribed my audio right into software. So that's how I wrote a lot of my book a few years ago was through podcasts. So, dude, you're on track, man. Don't give up. At the end of the day, keep fighting for you, keep fighting for your
Mm.
joy, keep fighting for your presence, and love this beautiful life that we have that's short because tomorrow's not promised, and we know it can crumble so fast and things can be taken away so fast. So just appreciate these moments, man. I'm proud of you. I love watching you shine and be vulnerable. That is a huge step that not a lot of people can do. So you are
Mm.
far ahead in the game compared to yourself, not to anybody else, man. You are
Yeah.
far in the
There we
game.
go.
So that's super dope, man. I'm super proud of you.
I'll take that, and I appreciate you being a part of this journey, man. It's not easy to step into somebody else's stuff when you're dealing with all your own stuff. So I'm really grateful, and I know a lot of people out there as well. So keep doing what you're doing. And this crossover collab here, I think, is the first of many. We got a lot more to talk about. We got a lot more therapy sessions to support each other in, and to bring more people into the fold. I could see this turning into something where, we talk about this openly in a way that we can't in other forums because there's there's nowhere to hide here. We're putting ourselves, everything that who we are and what we're willing to talk about, out on air, and that can be empowering when I think about it, right? I felt very, like, nervous. I texted you about it. I'm nervous. I feel very vulnerable and a little bit scared and apprehensive, and I'm like, airing my dirty laundry, but this allows you to do it in a way that's, like, open and freeing for people like us who really enjoy using the podcast platform as a way to, yeah, write that next chapter. So thank you so much, brother.
No, man. If thugs need love, chefs need therapy, man. It's okay.
Facts.
No, I'm so honored that I got to host and kind of take your seat for a day. So, just to the people, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today on the Best Served podcast. Stay tuned, subscribe, hit the link below, click, follow the story, follow the journey. Man, Jensen is an amazing person. As he continues to share, he's just going to bless y'all with knowledge and game. And you can always follow me at Chef Brother Luck across the board. So,
Do it.
again, thanks for tuning in, man. Your story matters, and you don't need that validation.
That's it.